My daughter said, "Mom's plane crashed, finally we can sell everything." I survived. The airline paid me $18 million. I repeated her words in a trembling whisper, as if saying them aloud might make them untrue, but deep down, I knew every cold syllable was meant to cut me. The betrayal burned hotter than any fear I'd ever felt in my 73 years. I had always believed my children loved me, and yet, in a single breath, my own daughter had wished me dead, so she could inherit what she thought was rightfully hers. My name is Margaret Whitmore. I'm 73, frail in body but stubborn in spirit, and my heart has learned to carry the weight of a lifetime of joys, regrets, and now shocking betrayal. That morning, I sat at the breakfast table, the autumn sunlight spilling through the window, and tried to steady my hands as my granddaughter, Lily, set down a cup of tea for me. She was 11, with her mother's dark curls and an innocent smile that could still warm even the coldest of betrayals. She had no idea yet of the storm raging in our family, or maybe she did, and her small, watchful eyes knew more than mine. The house smelled faintly of lavender and old books, a comforting aroma that had been my refuge for decades. I had spent years creating a life of careful routines and quiet happiness, yet nothing had prepared me for the moment my own flesh and blood could say such words with such ease. My daughter's call had come in the early hours, her voice oddly casual, almost cheerful. "Mom, the plane crashed," she had said. And then, after a pause that felt like a lifetime, she added, "Finally, we can sell everything." I clutched the edge of the table, my mind racing. The thought of the crash, the terror, the loss should have been enough to shake me. And yet, it was the callousness behind her words that cut deeper than any fear. How could someone look at the possibility of their mother's death and think of money first? Lily, sensing my trembling, reached out and took my hand. Her touch was a lifeline, a reminder that not all had turned cold. "Grandma, are you okay?" she asked softly. I forced a small, shaky smile. "Yes, my darling. Just a lot to think about." I could feel the knot in my chest tightening as I realized the path ahead. I would survive this. I would fight, but not out of anger. Out of dignity. Little did I know the plane crash was only the beginning. It would unravel years of hidden truths, reveal the greed that had quietly festered in my family, and ultimately force me to reclaim my life in a way that no one could have anticipated. I hadn't yet seen her greed in full, my own daughter, the person I had raised, scheming while I lay in the hospital, unsure if my body would even make it through the night. But as I stared at Lily's hopeful face, I promised myself one thing: they would not take my life, my dignity, or my legacy without paying a price. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. The harsh fluorescent lights reflected off the sterile walls, bouncing back at me like tiny mirrors of my own fragile body. I had survived the crash, a miracle the doctors called it, but surviving didn't erase the bitterness that awaited me at home. I could still feel the roar of the engines, the sudden lurch, the heart-stopping silence that followed. And yet, somehow I had lived. Somehow I was still here, but the truth was, returning home might be more dangerous than any plane crash ever could be. My daughter, Rachel, was the first to arrive, her face carefully neutral, her voice sweeter than it had ever been when she thought I might be gone. "Mom, I'm so glad you're alive," she said, placing a perfunctory hand on mine. But her eyes, those calculating, cold eyes, betrayed the truth her words refused to admit. I had always prided myself on knowing her, yet even I had been blind to the quiet greed lurking beneath her smiles. Lily was beside me, holding my hand with a grip stronger than mine, and I realized in that moment how much I depended on her strength. She was the only anchor I had left, the only reminder that love could exist in the midst of treachery. "Grandma, you're going to be okay," she whispered. And for the first time that day I believed it. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, insurance paperwork, and distant, polite condolences. Everyone spoke as if the crash were a tragedy, a somber moment of mourning, but I could feel Rachel's gaze on me, always calculating, always measuring. Each mention of the house, the car, the investments, it all felt like a countdown in her mind. Each passing hour she seemed more impatient, more eager for my life to officially end so she could claim what she wanted. At night I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering the fireball of metal and smoke, the panic of the passengers, the helpless cries, and I felt a strange mixture of fear and fury. I had cheated death, and yet somehow my family seemed intent on wishing it back into my life. How could someone want another's death so casually, so easily? The betrayal was a deeper wound than any physical scar I might carry from the crash. I decided I needed allies, someone who would see the truth for what it was. Lily was my first confidant. Her small hands would hold mine as I explained the situation, and though she didn't fully understand the complexity of adult greed, she understood injustice. "Grandma," she said one evening, "we'll fix it. You don't have to be afraid." And for the first time I began to see a strategy, a plan to survive more than just the crash itself, survive the people I once trusted. Rachel, meanwhile, began subtle tactics to unsettle me. Offhand comments about selling furniture before it loses value, casual questions about the will, glances that lingered too long. I smiled politely, nodded, but inside I was cataloging every word, every glance. I was learning that survival wasn't just about physical endurance, it was about mental sharpness, about seeing every move before it happened. By the end of the second week, I had realized the scale of what I faced. This was more than greed. It was a quiet, cruel ambition to erase me from my own life. And yet I was alive. I was present. I had Lily's love, my wits, and the knowledge that the law could protect me if I played it carefully. This wasn't just a story about a plane crash anymore. It was a story about betrayal, about reclaiming power, and about teaching those who wish to harm me that a grandmother's strength cannot be measured in age alone. And then it happened, the first unmistakable move that told me Rachel had begun her game in earnest. A helpful visit that was anything but, a suggestion that made my blood run cold, and the first hint that my daughter's greed was more dangerous than I had imagined. What she did next would set the stage for the battle I had no choice but to fight. It was a crisp morning, the kind where sunlight glimmered on the frost like scattered diamonds, yet inside the air felt thick with unease. Rachel arrived unannounced, her smile practiced and flawless, carrying a bouquet of lilies that somehow felt like a mockery. "I thought I'd come by to help you settle things," she said, her voice saccharine, each word coated with an invisible knife. I nodded politely, allowing her entrance, all the while noting the subtle sharpness in her tone, the way she lingered over my belongings as if weighing their value, not their sentimental weight. I had always prided myself on my grace. My parents had taught me patience, my husband had taught me resilience, and my own life had taught me caution. So I smiled, offered her tea, and let her chatter on, all the while cataloging every glance, every casual remark about things that might be better sold quickly. She moved through my house with a predatory ease, as though the very walls themselves whispered to her the hidden treasures within. Lily watched from the doorway, her small hands twisting the hem of her sweater. "Grandma, she's acting weird," she whispered, and I felt a pang of sadness mixed with pride. My granddaughter, so young, already noticing what I had learned only through years of living. People's intentions were often revealed in what they left unsaid. Rachel's first move became clear when she casually mentioned the will, her words designed to unsettle. "Mom, have you thought about updating your estate? You know, in case anything happens again." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The suggestion hung in the air like a noose. My pulse quickened, but I maintained composure, answering softly, "I'll consult my lawyer, Rachel. Thank you for your concern." Her eyes flicked to the pile of important papers on my desk, the insurance documents, the property deeds, the letters of intent. I had been meticulous in keeping them safe, but the look in her eyes told me she already knew their worth. The realization hit me like a second crash. Surviving the plane was only the beginning. I was now navigating a minefield within my own home, and every step could trigger disaster. That night, I sat by the fireplace, the flames dancing across the walls, and I allowed myself to feel the fury I had buried. The terror of the crash had faded, replaced by a raw, burning anger. Betrayal by a child was a wound unlike any other. I remembered all the nights I had stayed awake, worried for her, prayed for her safety, sacrificed for her dreams. And now she was calculating my death as if it were a business transaction. Lily curled up beside me, sensing my turmoil. "Grandma, we'll be okay. You're stronger than anyone." Her words, so small, carried the weight of mountains. In that moment, I realized that my survival was not just for myself. I owed it to Lily, to the generations that would follow, to show that integrity, wisdom, and courage could withstand even the deepest betrayals. By the next morning, I had formed the beginnings of a plan. Rachel would think I was weak, shaken, vulnerable. That was exactly what I wanted her to believe. Meanwhile, I began documenting everything, her words, her subtle suggestions, her eyes lingering too long over what was not hers. Each detail, each pattern was another brick in the foundation of the justice I would build. For the first time since the crash, I felt a sense of purpose rising like the morning sun. I had survived death once. I would survive her too. And when the time came, the reckoning would not be loud or messy. It would be quiet, precise, and utterly unshakable. Rachel's next move would go beyond subtlety. She underestimated me as she always did. But she did not yet know that every step she took brought her closer to a confrontation she was unprepared for. A confrontation that would expose her greed in ways she could never recover from. I should have known Rachel wouldn't stay subtle for long. Greed rarely hides itself patiently. It pushes, claws, and gnaws until it finds an opening. And within a week, she made her next move. It happened on a rainy Thursday morning, the kind where the sky stays heavy and gray, pressing down on the world like an omen. I was sitting by the window knitting a scarf for Lily, when I heard the familiar sound of Rachel's heels clicking down the hallway. She never knocked gently. She always announced herself with noise, like the world should be grateful she'd arrived. Today was no different. "Mom," she said briskly, "I've brought some papers you need to sign. Just routine things." She smiled tightly, placing a neat folder on the coffee table. The folder was cream-colored, elegant, and carefully curated, just like her traps always were. My heart thudded, but my face remained calm. "What kind of routine things?" I asked, keeping my tone light and airy, as though I were nothing but an oblivious old woman grateful for her daughter's help. Rachel sat down across from me, crossing her legs with practiced grace. "Just updating your accounts, simplifying ownership. You've had such a scare, Mom. We all just want you to rest." Her voice softened artificially. "It's time for you to let someone else handle the heavy stuff." I slowly opened the folder, my fingers steady though my stomach twisted. Inside were a dozen documents, account transfers, property authorizations, even a draft to give her control over my medical decisions. And each page was neatly tabbed where my signature was needed. She expected me to sign them without question. For a moment I simply looked at her. Really looked. The daughter I once tucked into bed, the girl who cried over scraped knees, the teenager who slammed her door when she didn't get her way. Somewhere along the path of her adulthood, something had hardened in her, maybe jealousy, maybe entitlement, maybe a lifetime of believing she deserved more than she earned. I didn't know the exact moment I lost her, but I felt it now like a blade twisting deep. I gently closed the folder. "Rachel," I said softly, "thank you, dear. I'll review these tonight." Her eyes narrowed for the slightest second. She hadn't expected hesitation. "Mom, you really shouldn't delay. This is all for your safety." "I know," I replied, nodding with grandmotherly sweetness. "That's why I want to read every word carefully." And something in her expression cracked. A flicker of irritation quickly masked. She stood abruptly. "Fine. Tomorrow then." The tone was clipped, impatient. Lily, who had been watching from the hallway, tiptoed to my side as soon as the door clicked shut. "Grandma, is she trying to take your house?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a child's earnest fear. I placed a hand over hers. "She's trying to take more than that, sweetheart. But don't worry. Grandma has seen storms before." That evening, after Lily fell asleep, I sat at the dining table under the soft glow of the old brass lamp. I opened the folder again, laid out each document, and began taking notes, quietly, methodically. I recognized a few tricks instantly. Clauses hidden in footnotes, ambiguous wording, transfers disguised as temporary authorizations. She thought age had softened my mind. But age had sharpened it. After documenting everything, I placed the papers back exactly as they were. Rachel needed to believe she still had the upper hand. When I finally turned off the lamp, the house felt unusually still. I stepped into the hallway, running my hand along the wall lined with family photographs. My husband's smiling face. Lily's first steps. A younger Rachel resting her head on my shoulder, laughing. Where had that girl gone? Sleep didn't come easily. My mind was too alive, too alert. If Rachel was this bold now, what would she attempt next? Yet beneath the fear, something new stirred within me, resolve. I wasn't just going to protect myself. I was going to teach her, teach them all, that a grandmother's silence is not weakness. It's preparation. The crash hadn't killed me. And neither would she. The next morning, I made a phone call Rachel never expected. A quiet, deliberate call that would start a chain of events she could no longer control. And when she learned about it, her mask would finally crack. The next morning dawned with a brittle stillness, the kind that feels like the world is holding its breath. I woke earlier than usual, my body aching, but my mind sharper than it had been in years. Today wasn't about survival, it was about preparation. Lily was still asleep, curled under her patchwork quilt, her dark curls spilling across the pillow. I kissed her forehead before slipping quietly into the kitchen, the old hardwood cool under my feet. I brewed a pot of tea, chamomile, my thinking tea, and sat at the small table near the window, listening to the distant hum of morning traffic. Then with steady fingers I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in almost a decade. Whitmore and Allen Law Offices. This is Evelyn speaking. I exhaled. Good morning, dear. This is Margaret Whitmore. I'd like to make an appointment with Mr. Allen, today if possible. There was a brief pause, followed by a warm tone of recognition. Mrs. Whitmore. Oh my, it's been ages. Of course. Let me see, yes, he can see you at 11. Perfect, I said softly. And, Evelyn, please keep this between us. Of course, Mrs. Whitmore, she replied without hesitation. I hung up, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. There had been a time when Rachel would have insisted on driving me, helping me with my coat, fussing over me with exaggerated concern. Today I didn't dare let her know I was leaving the house. At a little past 9 I called my neighbor Mrs. Jenkins, a sprightly woman in her late 60s with a fondness for oversized sunglasses and floral scarves. Would you mind driving me downtown? I asked. For you, Margaret? I'll be there in 10 minutes, she replied cheerfully. By the time Rachel arrived at 9:45 I was already gone. Mr. Allen, my longtime attorney, stood as soon as I entered his office. His hair was grayer than I remembered, his shoulders a little more rounded, but his eyes were still sharp. Margaret, he said warmly. I heard about the crash. My God, it's a miracle you're here. I nodded. A miracle, and a warning. I sat, placing my hands deliberately on the polished oak desk. I need to update everything. My will. My powers of attorney. My trust. All of it. He raised an eyebrow. That bad? I swallowed hard. My daughter brought me a folder of documents to sign. Ones that would have given her control over everything I own. His expression darkened. He leaned back, interlacing his fingers. You're doing the right thing by coming here. For the next 2 hours we went through everything line by line, clause by clause. I made changes that ensured Rachel couldn't touch a single thing without oversight. I placed safeguards, layers of protection. And most importantly, I established an irrevocable trust, with Lily as the primary future beneficiary. Quiet strength. Quiet justice. Before I left, Mr. Allen paused. Margaret, do you want me to call her? To warn her off? No, I replied, my voice calm but firm. Let her make her moves. I want her to show herself. He understood. On the way home, Mrs. Jenkins chatted about her begonias, unaware that my heart was pounding in anticipation of what awaited me. Because I knew Rachel would be waiting. And she was. She stood in the driveway, arms crossed, face tight with anger. Where were you? She demanded before I even stepped out of the car. I smiled gently, leaning on my cane. Out for some air, dear. You should have told me, she snapped. I was worried. No, she wasn't. She was rattled. Shaken by losing control for even a few hours. I held her gaze with a softness she didn't deserve. I'm fine, I said simply. Her jaw clenched. Did you look at the documents? I did, I replied and said nothing more. Rachel's composure cracked. And, are you signing them? I tilted my head, almost pitying her. I said I reviewed them, dear. That's all. A flicker of pure frustration flashed across her face. She was losing her grip. And I was only just beginning. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she asked in a small voice, Grandma, did you do something today? You look stronger. I smiled. Yes, sweetheart. I took the first step. Her eyes brightened. Good. And as I walked down the hallway, the house quiet except for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock, I felt it, a rising calm, a growing confidence. Rachel had made her move. Now it was my turn. The very next day, Rachel escalated in a way I hadn't expected, bold, desperate, and reckless. And the moment she did, I realized something chilling. She wasn't just after my things anymore. She was after my life. The next morning began with the unsettled quiet that only arrives before a storm, an uneasy calm that clung to the walls like a warning. I woke before sunrise, my body stiff with the familiar aches of age, but my mind clear and alert. I brewed tea and sat near the dining room window as pale gold light filtered through the curtains, illuminating dust motes drifting like tiny ghosts. I hadn't yet gathered the courage to tell Lily the full truth of what her mother was attempting, but I knew time was running short. As I sipped my tea, I heard the sudden slam of a car door outside, followed by hurried footsteps up the walkway. My heart tightened. Rachel didn't knock this time. She burst inside with a force that sent a cold shiver up my spine. "Mom, we need to talk now," she said, her voice sharp, clipped, almost frantic. I folded my hands in my lap, steadying myself. "Good morning to you too, dear," I replied softly, but she wasn't in the mood for courtesy. Her eyes darted around the room as if searching for evidence of betrayal. "Where were you yesterday?" she demanded. "Why weren't you answering your phone?" I took a slow breath, reminding myself that the power she thought she held over me was already slipping through her fingers. "I told you I wanted fresh air." She scoffed. "Fresh air? Don't lie to me." The accusation stung more deeply than it should have, not because of her words, but because of how easily she spoke to me with contempt, as though I were an obstacle rather than her mother. She paced the room, her heels clicking in uneven rhythm on the hardwood floor. "You went to see someone. Who? Friend? A doctor? A lawyer?" Her voice caught on the last word, trembling with anger and fear. I said nothing. Silence, I had learned, is more powerful than argument. It forces the truth to reveal itself. She stopped pacing and leaned over the table, her face inches from mine. "Mom, you need to sign those papers." The force behind her demand was different this time, no longer disguised, no longer wrapped in feigned concern. Raw, desperate, dangerous. "I won't sign anything," I said quietly, and the words filled the room like a sudden dropping of temperature. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "Why not?" she snapped. "Is someone manipulating you? Is someone turning you against me?" Oh, the irony. I kept my voice steady. "Rachel, I'm not signing away my life." Her nostrils flared. She straightened abruptly and marched toward the kitchen counter. At first, I thought she was simply storming off to compose herself, but then she grabbed something, my pill organizer. My weekly medications. My heart skipped. Slowly, too slowly, I rose from my chair as she snapped open the lid and stared down at the carefully arranged pills, her jaw tightening. "You're not thinking clearly," she muttered. "Maybe you're confused, maybe the crash damaged something." She plucked one of the white pills from Monday's slot and held it between her fingers. "Do you even know what these do? Do you even read the labels? You let things slip. You forget things. You need someone to take over." I felt the weight of her words settle on my chest like a physical blow. In that moment, I saw it clearly, not subtle manipulation, not financial hunger, but something far darker. Control. Total control. And if she had to paint me as incompetent, unwell, or unstable to get it, she would not hesitate. "Put that back," I said softly. "Rachel, put it down." He didn't. Her eyes flicked to mine with a look I had never seen before in my daughter, a cold calculation mixed with something unhinged. "Mom, if you're not going to sign the documents willingly, I'll have to take steps. Legal steps. Doctors. Evaluations. You're 73 and you just survived a plane crash. No one would question me." My throat tightened. "You would declare me unfit?" She shrugged, but the gesture was stiff. "If that's what it takes." For a moment, I simply stared at her, unable to move, unable to breathe. My mind raced back through the years, her first bike ride, her school plays, her wedding day, moments I had cherished, moments I had believed meant something. But standing before me was not the girl I raised. This was a woman who had allowed greed to hollow her from the inside out. The sound of footsteps jolted us both. Lily appeared in the hallway, rubbing her sleepy eyes, her small voice trembling. "Mom? Grandma? Why are you yelling?" Rachel stiffened, her carefully constructed facade cracking. She dropped the pill back into the organizer and forced a smile. "Sweetie, go back to your room. Grandma and I were just talking." Lily shook her head. "No, you weren't. You were mad." I reached for her, my hand trembling as I brushed her cheek. "It's okay, darling. Go wash up. I'll make breakfast. She hesitated, sensing something was wrong, but finally nodded and disappeared down the hallway. As soon as she was gone, Rachel leaned close and whispered, "You're making a mistake, Mother. And I won't let you ruin everything because you're too stubborn to accept help." "Help?" I repeated softly. "Is that what you call this?" She picked up her purse, her eyes cold and shining. "You have until tomorrow to sign the papers. All of them. If you don't, I'll have no choice." She left without another word, the door slamming so hard the picture frames rattled on the wall. For a long time I stood frozen in the quiet, the pill organizer still sitting crookedly on the counter, a silent witness to what she had been willing to do. The crash had been terrifying. But this was fear of a different kind. A fear of losing my autonomy, my dignity, my very identity, all at the hands of my own child. But beneath the fear, something hardened inside me. Resolve. A clarity. I wasn't going to be intimidated. I wasn't going to be declared unfit. I wasn't going to lose my life again. Well, she had just escalated the stakes. And in doing so, she had awakened a part of me I hadn't felt in years. The part that fought for myself. The part that never backed down. The part that survived. The next day I decided if Rachel was willing to push this far, I needed to push back quietly, strategically, and with the full strength of the law behind me. And that was the day I discovered something she never expected. She wasn't the only one keeping secrets. I barely slept that night. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw Clara's face the moment she learned I was alive, not relieved, not grateful, not even stunned, but inconvenienced. As if my survival had disrupted her weekend plans. The thought clawed at me like something feral. Dawn crept in through the thin curtains of Ruth's guest bedroom, pale and apologetic, and I woke with an ache behind my ribs that felt older than the night before. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long while, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea Ruth must have quietly left by the door, still warm. I stared at the rising steam and wondered how many years I'd lived blind to the truth about my own daughter. Ruth knocked softly before pushing the door open. "Aunt Elaine, you're up early," she said, her voice almost a whisper as though loud words might crack me open. I lifted my head, searching her face for signs of pity, but found only worry. "I need to know," I said simply. "Everything." She walked in, sat across from me and folded her hands. "Are you sure?" she asked. Sometimes partial truth hurts less than the whole thing. But I shook my head. I had survived smoke, screaming, metal tearing apart midair. I could survive the truth. So Ruth told me. She told me that Clara had been visiting lawyers long before the plane crash, discreetly, secretly, asking about the process of selling property held jointly with next of kin. She told me Clara had been trying to refinance my home without my knowledge, insisting that I was senile enough not to notice. She told me Clara had spent years spinning a narrative to extended family that I was slipping, forgetful, fragile, even though I had been working part-time, gardening, hosting book club, and managing my bills with the same precision I always had. She told me Clara had been pressuring the bank to let her co-manage my accounts. And that very morning, just hours after believing me dead, she had started listing my antiques online. My breath left me like someone had pulled a string from inside my lungs. It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the deceit. It was the revelation that my daughter, my child, my baby girl I had nursed while standing over a sink because I couldn't afford a rocking chair, had imagined her life easier without me in it. She had treated my plane crash as an opportunity. A relief. I felt something tighten inside me, not anger exactly, but a shift, as if a door inside my heart had quietly closed. "What about Lily?" I asked in a small voice. It mattered more than I wanted it to. Ruth's face softened. "Lily didn't know anything. I swear it. She's devastated. She cried all night." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. My granddaughter, my sweet, gentle Lily, had always been the warmth in an otherwise chilly house. The one who brought me handmade cards on holidays. Who hid little chocolates in my kitchen drawer. Who sat beside me during movies, leaning her head on my shoulder. If I lost her too, I wasn't sure I could bear it. Ruth reached out, covering my trembling hands. "Aunt Elaine, you're not alone. Not anymore." I stayed at her house for most of the day, my mind drifting like a boat untethered in fog. I replayed every argument Clara and I ever had, every moment she seemed distant, every phone call cut short, every holiday where she arrived late and left early. I remembered the sharp tone she used when she thought I wasn't catching on quickly enough with my phone, or when I spilled something on the counter. I remembered how she always spoke about inheritance jokes, "When you're gone, Mom," with a laugh too eager behind it. And I remembered brushing it all off as stress, exhaustion, adulthood, responsibilities. I had excused her cruelty for years because I loved her, because I wanted to believe the best. But now I could see it clearly. The coldness, the impatience, the subtle withdrawal. Love, I realized, cannot survive indefinitely on one side only. By late afternoon, I asked Ruth to drive me home. I needed to see it with my own eyes. My house, the one I had painted myself window by window. The one where I raised Clara alone after her father died. The one where I planted the magnolia tree on her 10th birthday. I needed to see what was left of my life before Clara started selling it piece by piece. When we pulled up to the driveway, I noticed the curtains in the front window had been pulled back. A light was on inside. And parked in front, too neatly to be coincidence, was Clara's car. Ruth placed a hand on my arm. "You don't have to go in." "Yes," I whispered. "I do." My legs trembled as I walked up the steps, but each step steadying me more than the last. When I opened the door without knocking because it was my house, my home, Clara spun around, her face draining of color like someone had wiped it clean. For a long moment she didn't speak. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I could hear her breathing, shallow, uneven. "Mom," she choked out. "What? How?" I didn't answer. I just stood there quietly, letting the weight of my presence fill the room. Letting her realize that the woman she had already buried was standing before her, watching. Clara swallowed, eyes darting to the boxes she had already filled, my china, my quilts, my framed family photos, my grandmother's brooch. Some labeled. Some already taped shut. I looked at them with a calmness I didn't feel. "You started early," I said softly. No anger. No shout. Just truth. "Mom, I thought everyone thought you were dead," she stammered. "Yes," I murmured. "And you celebrated." Her face twisted. "No. I didn't, Mom. I was in shock. I didn't mean to." I stepped closer, stopping her with a raised hand. My voice stayed soft. Steady. Almost too steady. "Clara, before the crash, before any of this, were you planning to take my things?" Silence. I watched her jaw tighten. I watched her eyes dart. I watched the truth sit heavy on her tongue, refusing to leave. Finally, she whispered, "I just wanted what was fair." "Fair," I repeated. "Fair would have been loving me while I was alive." Something broke then, not in me but in her. She turned her face away, guilt or anger or shame tightening her shoulders. I breathed in, slow and deep, the way the doctor had taught me during recovery. "I'm going to make some decisions," I said gently. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. Clara looked at me sharply then, fear flickering in her expression. She had expected a fragile old woman returned from disaster, desperate for comfort. But what she got was a woman who had walked through fire and sky and betrayal, and come out seeing everything clearly. I turned toward the doorway, my voice steady. "When the truth burns away everything unnecessary," I said, "only the real things remain." I walked out, leaving Clara standing among boxes she'd packed for a funeral that never happened. And in that moment, stepping back into the warm afternoon air, I understood something. Sometimes surviving isn't the miracle. Sometimes the miracle is finally seeing who people truly are and choosing yourself anyway. I didn't cry until I was back in Ruth's car, silent tears sliding down my cheeks, more from exhaustion than heartbreak. I had spent years believing that if I just loved Clara enough, if I forgave her sharpness, if I overlooked the small cruelties, she would someday return to me the way daughters sometimes do. But standing in my own living room, surrounded by boxes she'd filled before my body was even cold, I finally understood that love cannot tether someone who has already decided to drift. I wasn't weeping for the daughter I'd lost her long ago. I was grieving for the illusion I had clung to. Ruth didn't speak during the drive. She didn't need to. Her presence beside me felt like a warm quilt draped over my aching ribs. When she pulled into her driveway, she squeezed my hand and said, "You take your time, Aunt Elaine. You're allowed to rest before deciding anything." But the truth was, I already felt the seed of a decision forming, quiet but firm, right in the center of my chest. I spent the next 2 days at Ruth's house, healing in the ways a woman heals after betrayal, not with sleep, not with food, but with silence. with reflection, with the slow stitching of dignity back into the parts of me Clara had torn. Each morning I sat with a notebook, writing not lists or plans but memories. Memories of Clara as a child, laughing on the beach, hugging my legs, hiding behind me when she was scared. I let myself feel every version of her I had loved. And then I let those versions go gently, like releasing birds that had long been waiting to fly away. The third morning I woke with surprising clarity. I could feel a shift inside me, like the woman who survived the crash had finally met the woman who survived her daughter. And both agreed it was time. When Ruth came downstairs I was already dressed, my coat on, purse in hand. She paused in the doorway, studying me with quiet recognition. "You're ready," she said softly. "Yes," I answered. "It's time I took my life back." The first place we went was the bank. I walked in with my shoulders straight, my steps steady. The manager, a kind man I'd known for years, looked at me as though seeing a ghost. "Mrs. Harland," he breathed. "We heard you. I'm so grateful you're all right." I smiled, a tired but real smile. "I need to update my accounts," I said. We sat for nearly an hour, reviewing every detail, closing Clara's access, removing shared authority she had tried to establish, setting new protections in place. The manager apologized repeatedly for not informing me sooner about the inquiries Clara had made, but I waved off his guilt. Clara had always been clever about hiding her tracks. She knew how to sound concerned, responsible, burdened by the duty of caring for an aging mother. She had never expected the airline compensation to make me wealthy, but she had expected age to make me vulnerable. And that had been her strategy long before the crash. Once my accounts were secure, we went to an attorney. This wasn't about vengeance, it was about safety. The attorney, a calm woman with steel in her eyes, listened closely as I explained the crash, the aftermath, and my daughter's actions. She didn't interrupt. She didn't twist her expression into polite shock. She simply took notes, nodding occasionally, as if this was not the first time she had heard a mother speak of a child's betrayal. When I finished, she set down her pen. "You have every right," she said, "to protect your assets, your home, and your well-being. And given the size of your settlement, it's especially important." She explained my legal options, revoking Clara's rights as next of kin regarding financial decisions, restructuring my will, appointing a trusted executor, establishing a trust with clear conditions. Ruth waited patiently beside me, never once speaking for me but offering silent strength. When the attorney finally asked, "Do you want to remove your daughter from inheriting your estate?" I surprised myself by not answering immediately. The truth was more complicated. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want Clara punished. I didn't even want her to know what I was doing. I just wanted peace, protection, control over the years I had left. "I want Lily taken care of," I said quietly. "And I want decisions made without hurt feelings guiding them." The attorney nodded, understanding the diplomacy behind my words. She crafted a structure that left Clara with something modest, enough that no one could accuse me of cruelty, but ensured the bulk of my estate, including the settlement, would pass to Lily. And with that, a weight lifted from my chest. A weight I didn't know I'd been carrying for decades. That night, as I sat by Ruth's fireplace watching the flames dance gently, I finally allowed myself to think about the crash, not the terror of it, but the meaning behind my survival. I had lived through something that should have killed me. And maybe, just maybe, I had been given a second chance not to return to my old life, but to rebuild a new one. The next day I decided to go back home, not to confront Clara, not to provoke another scene, but to reclaim my space. When I stepped into my house again, it smelled faintly of cardboard and dust. Some boxes were still stacked in the corner, but Clara herself was gone. The silence was a relief I hadn't expected. For hours I slowly unpacked what she had taken out. I placed my grandmother's brooch back in its velvet box. I returned the china to the glass cabinet. I set each photograph back onto shelves, touching each frame with gentle fingers. I restored my home piece by piece until it felt like mine again, not a museum of memories, but a sanctuary rebuilt by my own hands. And then, as I was hanging a quilt back on its rod, I heard a quiet knock at the door. I froze. Another knock. Softer this time. I opened the door and there she stood, my granddaughter Lily. Her face blotchy from crying, her hands clutching her phone nervously. The moment she saw me, she burst into tears and threw her arms around me, holding on as though she feared I might disappear again. "I'm so sorry, Grandma," she sobbed. "I didn't know what Mom was doing. I swear I didn't know." I wrapped my arms around her shaking shoulders, feeling the warmth of her youth against my tired chest. "I know, sweetheart," I whispered. "I believe you." And in that moment, holding the one person who had loved me without condition, I realized something with quiet certainty. The crash had broken my body. My daughter's betrayal had broken my heart. But my survival was going to rebuild both. In a new way. On my terms. Starting now. Lily stayed with me that entire afternoon, refusing to leave even when I urged her to rest. She hovered in the doorway as I moved from room to room, her presence like sunlight trying its best to break through a thick cloud. She was quiet, thoughtful, watching me with a kind of protective grief that no 18-year-old should ever have to feel. There was a heaviness in her eyes, a sorrow deeper than her years, and though she didn't yet say what had happened between her and Clara, I could feel the fracture forming between mother and daughter. Pain me. Betrayal between generations can ripple like an earthquake, tremors reaching far beyond their origin. I didn't want Lily living her life with that burden. But healing has its own timeline, and I knew better than to force either of them into forgiveness or understanding before wounds had even scabbed. We made tea, her idea, always the one who believed warm drinks solved emotional troubles, and sat at the kitchen table where she used to color as a little girl. She watched me blow gently on my mug and asked in a tremulous voice, "Grandma, were you scared on the plane?" It was the first question she had asked about the crash, and she asked it with such care that it softened something in me. I took a slow breath. "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I was terrified. It happened so fast. One moment everything was normal and the next, I shook my head, the memories still raw. But what kept me going, what I kept thinking about, was you. She blinked, tears filling her lashes. "Me? You?" I repeated. "I thought about how you always hug me for a little longer than necessary. How you text me good night when no one else remembers. How you tuck a little chocolate in my coat pocket before school. I thought about the feeling of your hand in mine. I held on to that." Her tears fell then, silent, trembling. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand with that same familiar warmth. We sat quietly after that. The kind of quiet that holds more comfort than conversation. But peace, I knew, wouldn't last without confronting reality. By evening, my phone, charged for the first time in days, began to light up from messages. Some from neighbors who had heard, others from extended family. And then, Clara. Her texts flashed one after another on the screen, each more frantic than the last. "Mom, we need to talk. Please answer me. I feel awful about what happened earlier. It was a misunderstanding." I panicked. "Can I come over? Please, please." The pleading tone would have broken me once, before the crash, before the boxes, before I saw the truth laid out like evidence. But now I felt something unusual. A calm detachment. Pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes it settles like quiet snow. Lily glanced at my phone and tensed visibly. "Grandma, you don't have to respond. Not tonight. Maybe not ever." She hesitated, then added softly, "It's okay to protect yourself." Her words echoed something the attorney had told me, something Ruth had gently suggested, something life itself seemed to be whispering. Still, something in me felt unfinished. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "your mother is still your mother. Whatever she and I go through, you shouldn't have to carry the weight of it." Lily chewed her lip. "Grandma, I love my mom. But what she did, it wasn't just wrong. It was cruel. When we all thought you died, I was a mess. And her voice broke. She said, at least we won't have to worry about her anymore." Lily covered her mouth with her hand, ashamed to repeat it. I closed my eyes, letting the words wash over me. My daughter's voice layered over everything, over the years I held her through nightmares, over the scraped knees I bandaged, the birthday cakes I baked, the nights I worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. A mother never stops loving. But sometimes, she must step back to survive. I touched Lily's cheek, brushing a tear. "What your mother said was wrong. Deeply wrong. But people reveal themselves during grief, fear, or opportunity. Your mother, she saw an opportunity." I sighed. "That doesn't excuse it. But you shouldn't lose her because of me." Lily's voice hardened, not with anger but with clarity. "She's losing me because of her." We didn't say more after that. Later that night, after Lily had gone home, I stood in my living room, the faint hum of nighttime settling outside. My house felt different. Not haunted but aware. Like it was watching me decide how to reshape my life. And I knew I couldn't just wait for things to fall into place. I had to be deliberate. So I sat at my old writing desk, the one Clara had tried to list online, and I wrote a letter. Not to Clara, but to myself. A promise. I will not be pressured. I will not be guilted. I will not be used. I will rebuild my home, my peace, and my life without permission from anyone who tried to bury me before my time. When I finished, a gentle knock sounded at the door. For a moment my heart seized. Too soon for Lily to return, too strange an hour for visitors. I opened the door cautiously. On the porch stood my neighbor, Mr. Dempsey, an older widower with warm eyes and a face that looked shaped by kindness. He held an envelope in his hand. "Elaine," he said softly, "this came to my mailbox by mistake. It's from the airline." My stomach tightened. I took the envelope with shaking fingers, thanked him, and closed the door. I walked back to the living room, sat down, and stared at the crisp white paper. Slowly I opened it. Inside was a letter from the airline's claims department, formal, polite. But at the bottom, highlighted in blue ink, was a sentence that made my breath stop. "Your settlement has been approved for release. $18 million. I stared at the number for a long, long time. Not because of the money itself, but because of what it meant. Security. Independence. Freedom. A future I could design without fear or compromise. A life no one could manipulate, diminish, or encroach upon. For the first time in years I felt something daring spark inside me. Power. Not the cruel kind my daughter had craved. Not the careless kind that forgets its roots. But the quiet, sovereign power of a woman who has walked through fire and now knows her worth. I folded the letter gently, placed it in a drawer, and whispered, "My life begins again." But deep down I knew the road ahead wouldn't be simple. Because Clara wasn't done. And neither, I realized, was I. I woke the next morning feeling strangely steady, as if a storm had passed without my noticing. The letter from the airline sat tucked safely inside the drawer of my writing desk, quiet, powerful, waiting. I didn't rush to make any decisions about the money. Not yet. I wanted my mind clear, my emotions unclouded. Money has a way of pulling people apart, revealing truths they never meant to show. In my case, it had already exposed Clara's darkest corners. But now, with the settlement approved, I knew the shadows would only grow deeper. I spent the morning cleaning my house, slowly, methodically. Not because it was dirty, but because I needed to reclaim it, inch by inch, as if blessing each surface with my presence again. I dusted the shelf where Lily's kindergarten photo still sat crooked in its frame. I polished the wooden table where I had written grocery lists, holiday cards, and long letters to friends lost to time. I washed the windows Clara once insisted were too much trouble for someone your age. And with each task I could feel myself anchoring again, rooting. But by early afternoon the phone began buzzing once more. "Mom, please call me. We need to talk. It's important. I'm coming over." My chest tightened. I had hoped she would give me a moment of grace, space to breathe, to heal. But Clara had never been patient. Not when it came to control. Still, I refused to let dread dictate my day. I turned the phone face down, brewed myself a cup of chamomile tea, and sat by the window where the winter light softened the room to gold. I had just lifted the cup to my lips when I heard the car door slam outside. Slow, purposeful footsteps. Then a sharp, familiar knock. I closed my eyes for a moment, not in fear but in preparation. Then I stood, smoothed my sweater, and opened the door. Clara stood on my porch, hair unkempt, eyes red from crying or not sleeping, it was hard to tell. Her shoulders were tense, and she held herself the way someone does when they expect a battle. Without waiting for an invitation, she pushed past me and stepped inside. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling, "we need to talk. Now." I shut the door, turned slowly, and faced her. "We can talk," I said quietly, "if you can speak to me with respect." She let out an incredulous sound. "Respect? Mom, you've been avoiding me for days. You let Lily come here but not me. Do you know how humiliating that is? She's been acting like I'm the villain in some soap opera." I studied her carefully. Her anger wasn't about remorse. It wasn't even about fear of losing me. It was about losing control of the narrative, of the house, of whatever she imagined she was entitled to. "Clara," I said gently, "I needed time to recover." Recover. She laughed, a brittle, wounded sound. From what, Mom? I know what you think you heard in my driveway that night, but you took it the wrong way. I arched a brow. Then tell me what I misunderstood. She hesitated. Her gaze flickered. And for a moment I thought she might actually try the truth. But then her lips tightened. I was upset. Fuck. The insurance people were calling. The airline was calling. I didn't know what to do. I said things I didn't mean. But you said them, I murmured. She swallowed hard. Mom, I'm your daughter. I should be the one helping you right now. Handling things. Making decisions with you. But there was the heart of the matter. Control. My silence seemed to unnerve her. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. Mom, what's this I'm hearing about an attorney? And the bank? Were you really making changes behind my back? After everything we've been through. I chose each word with care. I'm making decisions for my own well-being. I'm not obligated to involve you. Her jaw dropped. Not obligated? I'm your only child. And I am still alive, I said softly. I survived, Clara. But I didn't survive to hand over my life to someone who already buried me once. She stiffened as if I had struck her. I wasn't burying you. That's not fair. Fair. My voice stayed calm, even compassionate. Fair would have been grieving first. Not packing boxes. She looked around the living room then, at all the items she had tried to claim before my body was even recovered. A flicker of shame crossed her face, so brief I almost doubted it. Then anger washed over it, fresh and sharp. What did Lily tell you? She demanded. She's always been dramatic. And she's been judging me from the moment I tried to talk about your estate. She thinks she knows everything, but she's just a kid. Lily didn't say anything I didn't already know, I replied gently. Her eyes narrowed. You ungrateful. She stopped herself, clenching her fists. Mom, I deserve a say in your future. I've been the one helping you for years. I held her gaze. No, Claire. You haven't. The truth, simple, unadorned, hung heavy in the air. You've been present, I added softly. But not helping. She stared at me, stunned. And then the shift happened the moment her face hardened into calculation. It is something familiar. The Clara who had visited lawyers behind my back resurfaced. Fine, she said coldly. If you want to do things legally, then let's do them legally. I know about the settlement, Mom. The airline called me first. A chill ran down my spine. She stepped closer. Too close. $18 million. And you think you're just going to, what? Give it to Lily? Hide it from me? Pretend I don't exist? My heart steadied with an almost unnatural calm. Clara, I murmured, the money is mine. She stared at me as if I'd spoken a foreign language. I continued, and I will use it to live comfortably, safely, happily, without fear of manipulation. Her face twisted. Manipulation? You think I would manipulate you? I answered gently. I know you already did. Silence filled the room, thick, trembling, electric. Then she whispered, You're choosing her over me. No, Clara, I said. I'm choosing myself. A tear, angry, humiliated, slipped down her cheek. She turned away, grabbed her purse and walked toward the door. At the threshold she paused. You'll regret this, she said quietly. You can't do everything alone. I smiled sadly. I'm not alone. She glanced back, confusion flickering. Who else do you have? I looked toward the framed photo of Lily on the shelf, then toward the empty doorway where Ruth had stood days earlier with unwavering kindness. I have the people who didn't sell my life for convenience. And with that, Clara left, slamming the door behind her. The house shuddered for a moment. But I didn't. I stood still, breathing deeply, feeling the pieces of my life rearranging, not by accident but by choice. Claire might have left angry, furious, determined. But I had left something to fear. And in its place rose something I hadn't felt in years. Strength. Quiet, steady, and wholly mine. Because now, the real confrontation was coming. And this time I would meet it standing tall. I didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. I lay in Lily's old bedroom, now my guest room, staring at the soft glow of her childhood nightlight still plugged into the wall. A ceramic moon with a gentle little smile. I'd kept it all these years. I never imagined I'd need its comfort again at 75. But that night, its glow felt like the only warm thing in the whole house. I kept replaying Jessica's face in my mind, her eyes wide with desperation, her voice cracking as she said she regretted everything. She wanted forgiveness, she wanted her mother back, she wanted to undo what she'd done. Or so she claimed. But there was something else mixed in her tears. Something tight. Something hungry. Almost as if she were grieving more for what she lost, the house, the inheritance, the money, than for what she nearly did to me. And it made my chest ache in a way no plane crash ever could. A plane falling from the sky had thrown me into terror. But my own daughter's betrayal threw me into grief. Real grief. The kind that sits heavy behind your ribs and makes every breath feel borrowed. Around 3 in the morning, I finally pushed myself out of bed and walked to the kitchen. The house was quiet, too quiet for a place that once held sleepovers, burnt pies, Christmas mornings, and little pink shoes scattered by the back door. I brewed myself chamomile tea and sat at the table, running my thumb along a scratch on the wood, the one Jessica made when she was 6, dragging a fork across the surface to draw Mommy a map. I used to think I'd keep it forever as a sweet memory. Now it felt different. Like a reminder of when things were still innocent, before whatever darkness nestled into her heart took root. I don't know how long I sat there before I heard soft footfalls in the hallway. It was Lily, wrapped in the blanket she always stole when she slept over. Her hair was messy, her eyes sleepy, but her expression softened the moment she saw me. "Nana, you're awake." She came to me like a child, even though she was grown 25, bright, kind to her bones. She dropped onto the chair beside me, pulling her legs up. "You're crying." I hadn't even realized I was. The tears had slipped silently down my cheeks, warm but unnoticed, the kind that come from a place buried deeper than sadness. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, brushing her hair back. "I don't know what to think." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "You don't have to think. Just breathe." We sat like that for a long time. No words. Just the rhythm of 2 hearts, one steady, one trembling. Finally Lily spoke. "Do you want her back in your life?" The question fell heavy between us. And the truth was I didn't know. "I want the daughter I raised," I said. "But I don't know if that daughter exists anymore." Lily wrapped her arm around mine. "Nana, people show you who they are when they think they've won. She thought you were gone. Really gone." And what came out of her mouth? "I know," I whispered. "I know what she said. Mom's plane crashed, finally we can sell everything." The words shook me every time I remembered them. Final. As if I were a barrier. A burden. Something to remove so she could breathe freely. People say awful things when they're grieving. I tried to rationalize. Lily tightened her hold. "Nana, she wasn't grieving you. She was celebrating." That truth hurt most of all. I spent the whole next morning in a haze. I baked muffins I didn't eat. Watered plants I didn't care about. Folded laundry that didn't need folding. Every time the doorbell rang or a floorboard creaked, I jumped, half expecting Jessica to show up again, half dreading it. By noon I knew I couldn't live in that limbo. I needed clarity, not from Jessica, not from guilt, but from myself. So I dressed slowly, choosing something that made me feel like me. A soft slate blue cardigan, pearl earrings, and the silver locket Lily gave me when she was 8. Then I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse and asked Lily to come with me. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To the attorney." Her eyebrows rose. "Are you sure?" "I need to finish what I started," I said. Not out of anger. Out of peace. The law office was quiet that morning, sunlit, warm, and smelling faintly of lemon polish. Attorney Pierce rose when I entered, his face gentle, understanding. "Mrs. Davenport," he said softly, "I assumed you'd be coming eventually." I sat across from him, my hands folded tight. Lily took the seat beside me, her presence like a grounding weight. I need to make decisions about my estate," I said. "My daughter, she can't be trusted. Not with my home. Not with my things. Not with my legacy." Attorney Pierce nodded slowly. "Are you ready to change your beneficiary structure?" I let out a trembling breath. "Yes." He opened a file, flipping through papers. "Who would you like as your primary heir?" I looked at Lily. Her eyes widened, misting instantly. "Nana, you are the only one," I whispered, "who held my hand when I was broken in a hospital bed. The only one who didn't rush to cash out my life when I went missing. The only one who saw me, not my possessions." Her lip wobbled. "But I never asked." "I know. That's why you deserve it." We spent an hour rewriting everything. The house. The savings. The trust. The $18 million settlement. The future decisions about my care. And when it was done, I felt lighter, not triumphant, not vindictive, just lighter. But part 11 wasn't about the legal victory. It was about understanding something I'd resisted for years. You can love a child with your whole heart, but you cannot force them to love you back. That night, I sat alone on the porch as the sun dipped behind the maples. The world was quiet again, but this time it didn't scare me. It felt like the calm after a storm, a moment where everything smelled clean, fresh, brimming with possibility. Then my phone buzzed. Jessica. Mom, please. Can we talk? I'm outside. My heart clenched. Part of me wanted to shut off the phone. Another part, the mother part, ached to open the door. I stood slowly, gripping the doorframe as I made my way through the house. Through the hallway. Toward the front window. And when I finally looked out, the next part of my story began. Jessica was standing at the edge of my porch, wrapped in a burgundy coat that looked far too light for the cold evening. Her hair was tucked behind her ears, her face swollen from crying or pretending to cry. I couldn't be sure anymore. The porch light illuminated half her face, leaving the rest in shadow, a fitting metaphor for the place she now lived inside my heart, half memory, half stranger. For a long moment I simply watched her through the window. Not hiding, not avoiding, observing. Seeing her not as the daughter I once adored, but as the woman who stared at my burning plane on the news and said, "Finally, we can sell everything." Finally. As if my death were a key turning in a lock she'd been waiting years to open. I placed my hand on the door handle, took a breath, and reminded myself, strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "You've survived enough." When I opened the door, the cold drifted in first. Then her. "Mom," she breathed as if the word itself carried 1,000 apologies. "Jessica." Her name left my mouth like an ache. Not angry, just tired. Exhausted in a way that only betrayal can carve into an old woman's bones. She stepped forward, but I didn't move to meet her. The space between us became its own truth. I know I don't deserve to be here," she said, her voice trembling. "But I didn't know how else to reach you. You blocked my number." "I needed time," I replied. "And peace." She nodded, biting her lip as tears gathered. "Mom, please. What I said that day, what you heard, I didn't mean it the way it sounded." That old phrase. The one people use when they've been caught in the naked light of their own cruelty. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself. "Then how did you mean it?" She flinched. "Hard." Her gaze fell to the wooden planks beneath our feet. "My life has been so hard lately," she whispered. "Bills. Stress. Trying to take care of everything on my own. And you thought my death would make it easier." Her head jerked up. "No. I mean, yes, I said it, but I was overwhelmed. I wasn't thinking clearly." I studied her face. Jessica could lie with tears. She always could. But she couldn't lie with her eyes, not to me. "It wasn't grief," I said quietly. "When I saw your face in that video, there wasn't a trace of pain." Her jaw tightened. "Mom, please. I'm begging you. I'm your daughter." She said it like a shield. Like a pass. Like a birthright to forgiveness. I folded my hands in front of me, feeling my age, my years, my hard-earned wisdom settle around me like armor. "I once believed," I said slowly, "that being family meant something sacred. But love isn't an obligation, Jessica. It's a choice. And somewhere along the way, you stopped choosing me." She broke then, full sobbing, hands trembling, voice cracking. "I messed up. I was scared. You can't just erase me from your life." Erase her. Oh, how wrong she was. If only it were that simple. "I didn't erase you," I murmured. "You erased yourself the day you placed a price tag on my death." She shook her head violently. No, I didn't, Mom, please, you have money now. $18 million. You can help everyone. You can fix everything. Please. Let me make it right." There was the truth. Not repentance. Not remorse. Just the hunger resurfacing. The same hunger I saw when she said, "Finally, we can sell everything." Money. Always money. I stepped back, letting the cool air settle between us again. "I changed my will today," I said. Her breath hitched. What? I couldn't leave my life, my memories, my home, or my legacy in the hands of someone who valued them more than me. He stared at me, frozen. You left everything to Lily? Yes. And in that moment, a storm crossed her face, shame, then shock, then rage simmering just beneath the tears. You're choosing her over your own child? She whispered. I'm choosing the person who showed me love when I needed it most. Her face twisted. I'm your daughter. And I am your mother, I said softly, not your wallet. Her mouth fell open and for the first time, she had nothing to say. We stood there in a silence that stretched like a lifetime. A silence that finally, mercifully told the truth. Mom, she whispered, can you ever forgive me? My throat tightened. I wished, oh how I wished I could say yes. That I could hug her like I did when she scraped her knees as a child. That I could pretend nothing broke between us. But forgiveness without change is just permission. I don't hate you, I said. I never could. But trust doesn't grow back just because you say sorry. A tear slipped down her cheek. So what happens now? You take your life, I said, and try to build it without expecting mine to fix it. She swallowed, stepping back as if the words physically pushed her. I understand. He didn't, not fully. But it was the closest she'd ever come to accepting consequences. I hope you find peace, Jessica, I whispered. Truly. She looked at me one last time. Not with anger. Not with remorse. But with something fragile, fear maybe. Realization. Loneliness. Then she turned and walked down the steps, her figure shrinking into the dark. I watched until she disappeared from view. When I closed the door, the house exhaled with me. And for the first time since I crawled out of that plane wreckage, I felt steady. Safe. Like the worst had finally passed. Lily found me in the hallway, her eyes searching mine. Nana. It's done, I whispered. She wrapped her arms around me and I leaned into her warmth. You did the bravest thing, she murmured. You chose yourself. Maybe I did. After 75 years of caring, sacrificing, smoothing over pain, maybe for once I chose me. Later that night, I sat on the porch with a cup of herbal tea, watching the stars prickle through the darkness. The world felt enormous and quiet and forgiving. The same sky I looked at from the wreckage of a dying plane. The same sky my daughter looked at while thinking of everything she'd gained from my death. The same sky that now watched over me as I reclaimed my life. I closed my eyes and let the cool air kiss my cheeks. I didn't lose a daughter that week. I lost an illusion. A hope. A fantasy of who she should have been. But I gained something else. Clarity. Faith. A granddaughter who loved me without condition. And $18 million that would, at last, be used for something good. The story didn't end in flames. It didn't end in anger. It ended in truth. And sometimes, that's the gentlest victory a woman my age can ask for.